Chapter 331. The Sequestration of the Hoff Family. Before Charles could come to his senses, the masked man had grabbed hold of him and was about to escape. "I'll be sure to pay you back for this, punk. Now that you've offended Shadowgate, there's nothing left for you except death," the masked man said to Caspian spitefully. Then, he took Charles with him and left the hall. "Don't let them get away," Alton shouted urgently. A group of armed soldiers chased after the masked man, but to no avail. The masked man was simply too fast for ordinary men to catch up with. Caspian was surprised. Nonetheless, he did not run after the masked man. The timing of this man's appearance was suspicious. It was too much of a coincidence. It was obvious he had been hiding in the dark, waiting for the right moment to attack. Considering how he could hide his presence so well and even escape Caspian's notice, his powers had to be much greater than Charles. He had been punched in the face by Caspian and was still able to run away. Caspian's punch was lethal. He could easily use it to kill an innate grandmaster. Could it be that this person had the strength of a supreme grandmaster? He could also be even more powerful than a supreme grandmaster. Caspian's mind was racing. He was trying to guess the real identity of the masked man. A few minutes had passed before Alton rushed over. "I have a report for you, Mr. Lynch. The men had let Charles and the masked man escape. We deserve to be punished," Alton said guiltily. He had let 2 injured men escape, even when he had hundreds of armed soldiers chasing after them. Alton was disappointed by his own incompetence. He felt uneasy as well. He feared Caspian would remove him from the governor's position in a fit of rage. He might be the governor, but he was powerless before Caspian. If Caspian were to give an order, he would be impeached right away. "What's done is done. You're not to blame. It's normal you weren't able to catch up with them. This person's skilled," Caspian said as he glanced at Alton briefly. Having confronted the masked man personally, Caspian had him figured out. The masked man's breathing was controlled. He was a real fighter with solid skills. Ordinary men like Alton would never be able to catch him. Alton was relieved to see that Caspian was not angry. He was afraid Caspian would be angry and fire him as a result. "Now that Charles has escaped, what's our next move, Mr. Lynch?" Alton asked respectfully. "Investigate the Hoff family at once and seize all their funds. Begin the crackdown on New Bay's underground forces. As for their casinos, I'm sure you know what you need to do, right?" Caspian said with a smile. "Also, I hope that you can be upright in carrying out your duty of sequestering the Hoff family's estates. If I catch you coveting their estates, don't blame me for being merciless." The Hoff family's multi-generational wealth would naturally tempt anyone who came across it. Some people might even attempt to run off with a portion of the money. Caspian had to warn Alton and his men in case they were thinking of doing something of the sort. "I wouldn't dare. Rest assured, Mr. Lynch, I'll personally handle the operation myself," Alton said. His back was already soaked in cold sweat. He knew very well that Caspian was a man of his word. In the past, Alton might have turned a blind eye. Now that they were at a critical juncture, anyone who dared to disrupt the operation would be punished. Caspian eyed Alton one last time before leaving. Once the night was over, the Hoff family would be gone. Charles went from being a god of gambling to a vagabond. He would no longer be a threat. The heavy downpour never stopped. It was a rainy night. Caspian walked into the rain while holding a black umbrella. He had an imposing presence. After Caspian finished his task, he left quietly. The news of Caspian breaking into the Hoff family's residence would definitely make the rounds among people. Alton finally let out a sigh of relief when Caspian's figure slowly disappeared into the distance. His shirt was completely soaked in his cold sweat. Caspian's brooding presence was truly frightening to the people around him. He never had to utter a single word for people to fear him. All it needed was one look from him to send shivers down people's spines. After all, only someone like Caspian could keep peace and safety. The Diatoranian god of war was a high-ranking role known by all. Even so, the role required him to be under constant pressure. Alton then sighed. "Let's go," he commanded. A few of the soldiers dragged Jean out. Hoff residence had once been a home filled with life. Now it was just filled with eerie silence. Alton took a glance at the Hoff family home. It was like purgatory on earth. The floors were covered in blood that was still flowing, corpses piled like mountains. The horrendous massacre filled the air with the metallic smell of blood. Alton was feeling a swirl of emotions. He had been battling with Charles for decades. It felt surreal now that the Hoff family had suddenly been destroyed. Shortly afterward, he managed to regain his composure. Launch an investigation into the Hoff family right away. Bring the surviving servants back for interrogation, Alton commanded. He did not leave as he had to handle these matters personally. The next day, a piece of earth-shattering news spread all across town. The Hoff family, the top elite family of New Bay, had been destroyed. Charles, the head of the Hoff family and the god of gambling, had fled. The governor had personally announced the bounty for capturing Charles. It was a whopping $30 million. Gene Hoff, the eldest son of the Hoff family, had been handed over to the Inspector General's team for his crimes. All of the Hoff family's estates, including their casinos, had been seized overnight. At the same time, another force had begun wiping out the underground forces in New Bay. The Inspector General's office had dispatched a large troop for this operation. The scale of this operation was unprecedented. Many of the underground forces' leaders were also arrested. Chaos swept through the entire city. Nevertheless, New Bay swiftly sunk back into its usual quiet. With the underground forces eradicated, the civilians found their city had become much more harmonious. They no longer had to worry about criminal activities. All the gangsters on the street had also disappeared. There was less chaos in the city. This allowed the civilians to start living a regular life. Now that life had returned to normal, they no longer had to live as if every day was a gamble with luck. In one of the luxury suites at New Bay Grand Hotel, Alton was reporting on the progress of their crackdown operation. I have raided the entire Hoff family according to your instructions. I've also arrested many of the forces affiliated with the family. The underground forces of New Bay no longer exist. All of the casinos are basically shut down. Alton said deferentially before Caspian. Just get to the point. You have to tell me the total amount of the Hoff family's estates, Caspian interrupted impatiently. Alton's entire body trembled. Sweat broke out on his forehead. Chapter 332 Shadowgate. Caspian could not be bothered to waste his time and energy listening to Alton's rambling. He only needed to report the significant points. Caspian really wanted to know the total worth of the Hoff family's assets. This was more important to him. Once they confiscated their assets, it would be a good thing for Diatoran. He did not care about the other matters as they were trivial to him. Everything the Hoff family owns added up to a total worth of $80 billion. These include famous paintings, jewelry, and real estate, Alton said as he quivered with fear. What? Isn't the Hoff family worth hundreds of billions of dollars? How could it only be $80 billion? Could it be that you have pocketed the rest? Caspian said as he scowled. He glared at Alton. It was as if his piercing eyes could almost see through Alton. The air around them seemed to grow heavy. Caspian's malicious energy suffocated Alton. His body stiffened, and he was at a loss. He felt like he was really going to die. It was only then that Alton could finally comprehend how powerful Caspian was. His every move, even one look from him, could make people feel unprecedented fear. How strong was Caspian? Alton began wondering about the extent of Caspian's strength. As the Diatoranian god of war, he should be the most powerful person in Diatoran. His strength should be at the level of a supreme grandmaster or even higher. Lord Caspian, I have personally supervised the entire operation. All my subordinates can testify that I have not taken a single cent, Alton explained with urgency. Tears had started welling up in his eyes. He was afraid that Caspian would remove him from the governor's position. He did not want to be wrongly accused. He had spent the first half of his life working his fingers to the bone in order to become governor. Losing this position would mean losing everything. But is it possible that Charles, the god of gambling, only has 80 billion worth of assets? Would you believe it? Where's the rest of the assets? Caspian asked coldly. Where could the remaining hundreds of billions worth of assets be? If they did not get to the bottom of it, this would be a huge loss to Diatoran. The finances of the entire South Lake City might not even amount to hundreds of billions. If Alton or the others had stolen the assets, Caspian would definitely not show any mercy to them. He would be sure to punish Alton severely. Lord Caspian, I'm really innocent. Charles is a cunning man. He'd been transferring their family's assets discreetly for decades. He had used various means to transfer the properties, Alton said as he burst into tears. If you hadn't taken action in advance, I'm afraid he would have already transferred all of their assets away," he continued. Alton had looked into the Hoff family's casinos, villas, and some of their real estate properties. These were all immovable estates. These estates alone amounted to $80 billion. As for the remaining portion, Alton had zero clue about where Charles had transferred them to. Besides, this was the most critical time of their operation. He would not dare to disrupt the flow. Caspian nodded after hearing his explanation. Charles was more cunning than he had expected. At first, he had kept his true powers hidden. But now, he had even managed to transfer a large portion of his assets in advance. It seemed like Charles had expected that a day like this would come. If he had not stopped Jean in time, all of their assets could have already been transferred abroad. Hundreds of billions worth of assets was not a small amount for Diatoran. Caspian's silence made Alton anxious. He could not stop his arms from trembling. "Your job here is done. If there's nothing else to report, you may leave now." "You've done a pretty good job. I will let His Majesty know about this," Caspian said to Alton as he waved him off. Alton was incompetent in his governance. Charles took a few decades to grow his empire and managed to become the supreme leader of New Bay. Nevertheless, it was fortunate that nothing ended in disaster. Otherwise, Caspian would have also interrogated and punished him. Alton was relieved to hear this. "Thank you, Mr. Lynch," he said with utmost respect. If Caspian could put in a good word for him before the king, his future would be a smooth sailing one. "If there's nothing else, I'll go first, Lord Caspian," Alton said, curtsying. "Hold on!" Caspian suddenly, and when Alton was about to leave, Alton was startled. "My lord, is there anything else you'd like to instruct?" Alton asked fearfully. "Arrange a private plane for me." "I'm leaving," Caspian said. "You're leaving already, Lord Caspian?" Alton was taken aback. Caspian found Alton's expression amusing. He chuckled and said, "What's the matter? Do you prefer that I stay for a couple more days?" Alton said as his face turned pale. Although Caspian had only been in New Bay for a few days, he had managed to turn the city upside down. Wendell had died, the Hoff family had been obliterated, and all of the underground forces in New Bay had been wiped clean. If Caspian continued staying here, Alton might not be able to take it. "You may leave now," Caspian said, smiling as he looked at Alton's resigned face. "Yes, sir." Alton nodded and left immediately without any sign of hesitation. After Alton left the suite, Sylvia came forward and asked, "Caspian, are we really leaving?" "Yes. I've been here for too long. It's time I go back and be with my wife," Caspian said while nodding. Just thinking about Willow put a smile on his face. "By the way, Alton wasn't lying, was he?" Caspian asked. He still did not trust Alton fully, which was why he had Sylvia investigating Alton in secret. "He wasn't lying. He was personally involved in the operation," Sylvia replied. They were at a critical juncture, so Alton would not dare to lie to Caspian. If he dared to block the flow of their operation, it would only lead to his death. "These cunning old men," Caspian scoffed. Dealing with Charles was more difficult than he had expected. He had actually planned for his escape 10 years in advance. It was surprising that Charles was such a foresighted person. Sylvia understood what Caspian was trying to say. The cunning old men he referred to were Charles and Alton. "Have you also found out who was the one who took Charles away?" Caspian asked. "I've tried using the intelligence network, but to no avail. There was nothing I could find out about Shadowgate," Sylvia replied. Caspian's face hardened. Sylvia had been with him for a long time, and had many informants in Diatoran as well. The intelligence organization was also well established, so it came as a surprise and a bit of a disappointment that she could not find anything about Shadowgate. It seemed like Shadowgate had hidden themselves really well. Moreover, their prowess was not like the others. Even a senior member of theirs was an innate grandmaster. This could only mean that the other members were equally powerful as well. It seemed like there were more forces in Diatoran that had yet to reveal themselves. "Caspian, do you need me to continue arranging for more people to investigate?" Sylvia asked cautiously. Chapter 333 Cole's assassination plan. "Not for the time being. Shadowgate will show their weakness sooner or later," Caspian said dismissively. He had a feeling that Shadowgate would become a huge problem for them. Since they could not gather any intel on them, they decided not to investigate for the time being. They would attack and destroy Shadowgate once it exposed its Achilles heel. There were thousands of soldiers waiting near New Bay International Airport. A private plane had landed. Since he was the Diatoranian god of war, he would naturally make use of his privilege for times like these. There was a great distance between New Bay and South Lake City. Caspian would undoubtedly choose the most convenient method. The private plane offered better service. "Have a pleasant journey, Lord Caspian," Alton said. He had brought his men with him and had waited at the airport early to see Caspian off. "New Bay still needs you. I hope that you can maintain the order of this city. I do not wish to hear anything about the expansion of underground forces. There shouldn't be the emergence of a second god of gambling as well. Do you understand?" Caspian said to Alton. Caspian could only get New Bay out of its current predicament. As for its future, he still needed to rely on Alton as its governor. Otherwise, everything he had done so far would amount to nothing. "Yes, Lord Caspian," Alton replied firmly. Caspian did not wish to have another god of gambling compete with him for power. Now that New Bay had finally come under his governance again, Alton would definitely cherish this opportunity. He would do his best to secure his position as the governor. There would not be a second god of gambling. He would have the entire city under his control. "I'll have someone watching you," Caspian teased. Alton was never a righteous man after all. Casinos were everywhere in New Bay. To open a casino there, they had to have bribed Alton. He must have received countless benefits from this alone. Without his approval, many would not have dared run their gambling business. Caspian felt the need to warn him, lest he went astray. Alton understood clearly what Caspian was hinting at. "Rest assured, Lord Caspian, I will carry out my duties honorably," Alton replied. After all, he had witnessed for himself what Caspian was capable of. Even a god of gambling like Charles could not defend himself against Caspian. Alton would not want to have a miserable ending. "Let's go," Caspian said to Sylvia. When Alton saw Caspian and Sylvia leave, he breathed a sigh of relief. He no longer had to be anxious. As long as Caspian remained in New Bay, he would never be able to lift his head up. Now that Caspian had left, he was the king of New Bay. He no longer had to walk on eggshells and obey others' orders. Just as Caspian and Sylvia entered the plane, something happened. "Caspian, where do you think you're going?" A loud voice was heard coming from a distance. Caspian turned around to see a figure emerging from his hideout and rushing toward him. In this person's hand was a bright dagger. He was charging at Caspian. Caspian's face darkened. He knew this person. It was Cole. Cole had been lying low while he was in New Bay. He had watched Caspian kill Wendell. However, he did nothing about it and was lurking in the area. He had never given up on his revenge against Caspian. He was just waiting for the right time. Caspian had not forgotten about Cole at all. As the head of Galacrest, he was not entirely powerless. Nonetheless, after Galacrest was destroyed, Cole became a vagabond. Between him and Caspian stood a bloody feud. Seeing Cole approaching menacingly, Caspian smirked. He knew very well that Cole would never forgive him for what he had done. He just never expected to see him at the airport. It was pretty daring of him to show up at this heavily guarded place. There were about thousands of soldiers at the airport. Was Cole being wise, or was he being foolish? "Protect Lord Caspian," Alton shouted in a state of panic after Cole suddenly appeared. If anything were to happen to Caspian within his jurisdiction, he would never be able to make up for it. The soldiers who were guarding the airport heard his shout and rushed over immediately. They had Cole surrounded in the blink of an eye. However, it all happened too fast. Moreover, Cole was a pretty powerful person. His movements were very quick. The soldiers simply could not catch up with him. Nobody expected that Cole would sneak into the airport. When Cole saw the soldiers rushing toward him, mockery filled his face. He had been lying low for several days so that he could find the perfect opportunity to assassinate Caspian. Cole chose the airport because the most dangerous place was the safest place. Moreover, he had the diatanium dagger in his hands. He had to behead Caspian today. Cole had his glare fixed on Caspian. As he charged toward him, he said menacingly, "Caspian, you have destroyed Galacrest. Today, I must pay you back for all that you've done." As Cole shouted, the energy in his body increased. He had now become an innate grandmaster. In order for him to take revenge against Caspian, he had trained day and night and had finally become an innate grandmaster. The audacity to attack Lord Caspian again. You're definitely asking for it, Sylvia exclaimed as she charged forward. She had been staying beside Caspian the entire time. When Cole saw Sylvia, he smiled slightly. Before this, he was utterly afraid of Sylvia. After all, Sylvia had killed his subordinate, Night Shadow, at Veiled Dragon Bay before. However, things had changed since. Cole had already gained the powers of an innate grandmaster. He even had a diatanium dagger. If Sylvia dared to stop him, she would definitely die. You came just in time. I want to kill you and avenge Night Shadow. It's such a shame, though, for you have such silky smooth skin, Cole sneered. Then, he gripped the dagger firmly and lunged at Sylvia. With a bright flash, the diatanium dagger flew toward Sylvia like lightning. Sylvia's face hardened. She noticed an unusual energy. This dagger was not just any dagger. Cole's energy had also surged a little along with the dagger. What dagger is this? Sylvia asked in a surprised tone. Then, she shifted her stance and took a few steps backward. She was shocked by the malicious energy emanating from Cole's entire body. It had not been too long since they last met, yet Cole's powers had improved drastically. If she had not dodged it in time, the dagger would have pierced her. Surprisingly, the dagger carried a malicious energy. Cole laughed when he saw Sylvia back away. Still want to come at me? He taunted. Previously, he was not Sylvia's match. Now, he finally had a chance to defeat her. However, he did not want to waste time on Sylvia. His ultimate target was Caspian. He wanted to kill Caspian to avenge Galacrest and his subordinates who died. It was now or never. He only had one chance. Come and fight me head-on. Caspian, let's end things once and for all, Cole said to Caspian. Chapter 334. Cole's failed assassination. How daring of you to come here and assassinate me. I thought you'd run away, Caspian taunted. Even Caspian was taken aback by Cole's intense energy. Cole! Nonetheless, the fact that Cole was now an innate grandmaster meant nothing to Caspian. He could not change the outcome even if he had an extraordinary dagger. To Caspian, Cole was still someone unworthy. He was not a threat to Caspian at all. Caspian, we have some unfinished business. Go to hell, Cole said impatiently. Then, he clenched the diatanium dagger tightly and aimed it at Caspian. Caspian's indifferent expression infuriated Cole. He had to kill Caspian. In fact, he was already dead to him. Caspian! Sylvia had just regained her composure, but the scene unfolding before her made her heart drop. If anything were to happen to Caspian while she was with him, Diatoran would not forgive her. Lord Caspian, be careful. Alton had also started panicking. He wanted to protect Caspian as well, but he could feel that Cole's power had gotten much stronger. He would only die in vain if he rushed forward hastily. After all, he was only an eternal grandmaster. He had no chance of winning against Cole. Cole smirked as the diatanium dagger got nearer to Caspian. The grudge between us ends here, Caspian. You should feel honored to die by my hands, Cole roared. The dagger in his hands was really close to Caspian. A sound broke through the air. It was as if the surrounding air had been pierced by the dagger. Where could this dagger have come from that it was so powerful? A look of surprise appeared on Caspian's face. It seemed like Cole had come prepared. The diatanium dagger, Caspian murmured. The dagger turned out to be the diatanium dagger. It had an entire history behind its origin. Rumor had it that it was used specifically for dismemberment because of its sharpness. It was unexpected that this dagger still existed. Cole had put in a lot of effort for this revenge. With the dagger in his hand, Cole aimed directly at Caspian's heart. The dagger would definitely tear through Caspian's heart. When that time came, he would surely die. Right at that moment, Caspian suddenly laughed scornfully. Suddenly, there was a flash. A bloodied arm flew out. What followed next was the most agonizing wailing anyone would ever hear. Everybody was stunned. When they came back to their senses, they realized that a knife had appeared in Caspian's hand. The blade was soaked in blood. There was a bloodied arm at Caspian's feet. The arm was still holding onto a dagger. My arm, Cole wailed as he covered his severed arm. The excruciating pain almost made him pass out. He had thought he would win the battle as he had become an innate grandmaster. He never thought he was still not worthy of being Caspian's opponent. After losing his arm, He had completely lost all the will to fight. His plan to assassinate Caspian came to naught. Caspian put away the blade in his hand. "I've already defeated you once, and you still think you can kill me? What a joke." Caspian mocked and laughed at Cole, who was writhing miserably on the ground. He could not be bothered about him anymore. He looked at the ground and picked the Diatanium dagger up. It was indeed a magical weapon. It was just unfortunate that such a weapon had fallen into the hands of a loser like Cole. Caspian kept the Diatanium dagger. "Arrest Cole!" Alton roared. A few of the soldiers rushed out and apprehended Cole. "Take him back for a thorough interrogation," Alton said, with a black look on his face. Cole had almost injured Caspian. If Caspian was killed in New Bay, Alton might have lost his life as well. Alton wished he could just tear Cole into a million pieces for causing such a huge problem. "Hold on," Caspian said, holding his hand out. "Lord Caspian, this person's way too dangerous." "We better," Alton yelled with a darkened face. "It's fine. I need to ask him some questions," Caspian interrupted. He walked to Cole. Cole had already lost a huge amount of blood then. His face was as pale as a ghost's. A look of disdain appeared on Cole's face as he saw Caspian approaching him. "I'm really curious, Cole. Where did you get the Diatanium dagger from?" Caspian asked Cole, smiling. He did not see Cole using this dagger when they fought at Naporia before. Cole gritted his teeth and kept mum. When Caspian saw Cole remaining silent, he said, "Even if you don't tell me, I know that it was the York family of Dord City who gave this dagger to you. Right?" Caspian caught the change in Cole's expression and knew his guess was correct. "Tell me, who ordered you and Wendell to assassinate me?" Caspian asked again. Cole could not answer this question. In fact, he did not dare to answer. He was going to die either way, so he decided to just keep his mouth shut. "Did you become deaf, Cole? Did you not hear Lord Caspian asking you a question? Seeing as you're daring to remain silent, you must have a death wish." Alton got annoyed when he saw Cole remained tight-lipped. Alton finally shut his mouth when Caspian raised his hand. "You think I know nothing, Cole? Was it the Kane family of Dord City who'd sent the both of you here? I didn't think you'd be attached to the Kane family." Caspian grinned from ear to ear. Cole was stunned. His eyes widened. How did Caspian know? Caspian laughed and said, "I must have gotten it right. So it is the Kane family of Dord City." Previously, he had already asked Sylvia to look into where Cole went after escaping Naporia. "Kill me or cut me up. Just get on with it already. Caspian, why are you still blabbering away?" Cole said through gritted teeth. He was truly surprised that Caspian knew everything. "Kill you? You don't deserve to have me kill you. Someone else will deal with you," Caspian scoffed. Caspian could not be bothered with a mere loser like Cole. Cole was livid. Caspian was being too harsh. He felt insulted. He had never felt so humiliated before. Chapter 335, The Definite End. "Take him away," Caspian said dismissively. Caspian suddenly felt bored. Cole was like an annoying bug. Thankfully, he had been dealt with. "Take him away," Alton said coldly. A few of the armed soldiers took Cole with them. "Caspian, you bastard, I'll get you back. Even if I die, I'll make sure to haunt you and take your life away." Cole swore loudly. Caspian scorned. Cole was about to die, and yet he was still spitting harsh words. "I have failed to subdue him and let him alarm you. I'm ready to be punished," Alton said anxiously. Even though Cole had been apprehended, it was still his domain. Having something like this happen in his territory meant he could not fully absolve himself from any blame or responsibility. With a thump, Alton fell to his knees before Caspian. "There's no need for this. You may rise now. Your punishment shall be a 2-month salary deduction. Nevertheless, if I happen to receive any complaints about the safety of New Bay in the future, I will hold you accountable," Caspian said to Alton in a casual tone. The fact that Alton had failed to notice an outsider disguising himself as part of their security team spoke volumes about their reliability. Caspian would not entrust important duties to them anymore as well. The governor's position would also become the pinnacle of his career progression. There would no longer be any further opportunities for him to climb the ladder. If Caspian wanted to, he would have fired Alton from his position over this incident. Nevertheless, his removal would bring about disarray to New Bay. Fortunately, there was not any harm caused by the incident. Caspian decided to just shrug it off. Rest assured, Lord Caspian, I'll definitely preserve the harmony in New Bay, Alton said anxiously. He was aggrieved. He did not expect this kind of accident to happen. It was clear to him that he might have reached the end of his career. At that, Alton groaned. That bastard, Cole, had ruined his career. He could have chosen to assassinate Caspian anywhere else, but he decided to do it at a heavily guarded airport. This was clearly an attempt to embarrass him. Nonetheless, Alton was lucky that Caspian decided not to get to the bottom of this incident. Alton was already really lucky to have been able to keep his governor's position from the start. He took a few steps backward and stood there silently. Caspian glanced at Alton and thought that someone like him was unreliable. Lord Caspian, I couldn't protect you because of my incompetence. Please punish me as you see fit, Sylvia said remorsefully. It's fine. You're not entirely to blame. Everything happened too suddenly. You have responded well. Cole had become an innate grandmaster, and he even had the Diatanium dagger. It's not a surprise that you couldn't handle him, Caspian said to Sylvia. Sylvia had been working tirelessly alongside Caspian for many years. He would not punish her over one mistake. Considering how everything had happened so suddenly, she'd already done her best. It was normal that she would feel threatened by Cole's malicious energy and dodge on instinct. Even so, this meant that Sylvia needed to improve on her strength. Thank you, Lord Caspian. Sylvia was touched. She felt that Caspian was really considerate as well. This was why she had remained loyal to Caspian for so long. When Alton saw the way Caspian treated Sylvia, he was envious. However, he knew very well that Sylvia was Caspian's right-hand woman. Caspian would not punish her as long as she did not commit any huge mistake. After everything had been settled, Caspian boarded the plane. With a roar of the engine, the plane departed from New Bay Airport. Alton was momentarily stunned as he watched the plane disappear into the sky. Caspian's departure left Alton feeling complicated. He no longer dared to act however he wished. He knew very well that Caspian must have planted his men in New Bay to keep an eye on him. He needed to be vigilant. Otherwise, he might just lose his governor's position. Governor, Deputy Gibson shouted when he saw Alton getting lost in his thoughts. When Alton finally came back to his senses, his expression became serious. Let's go, he said. Then, he left the airport with his men. Caspian could have put in a few good words for him before the king. But because of that bastard, Cole, he even almost lost his job. He needed to punish Cole severely. Somewhere outside the airport, Celestia was watching the plane from the observation deck of a skyscraper with a telescope. She had a sinister look on her face. She never expected that Cole would be so useless. He already got the Diatanium dagger, yet he still could not defeat Caspian. It seemed like the York family's vengeance was hers to seek. Unfortunately, she no longer had a home to return to. Now, the York family only existed in name. Even if she went back, it would be meaningless. Besides, she could not return. Chandler would make her life a living hell. Having given it some thought, she had decided to remain incognito and find an opportunity to attack Caspian. Celestia put on her veil, turned around, and left. Her journey of vengeance had officially begun. On the next day, a public trial was held for Jean and Cole. Because the Hoff family had committed many crimes, Jean was sentenced to life in prison. He would be spending the rest of his life behind bars. Cole was handed over to the Inspector General's office of Naporia. Similarly, he was given a sentence as well. He had carried out many illegal activities in Naporia as the master of Galicrest. He had committed too many heinous crimes and was, therefore, given a death sentence. There was no delay at all. Their punishments were executed on the same day the sentences were given. A shot was fired. Cole, who was once a supreme leader, had tragically died. The news had made its rounds to Kane residence in Dord City. Mr. Kane Sr., I've got the latest news from New Bay. Wendell and the rest have suffered a disastrous defeat. Wendell was shot to death by Governor Alton. Cole was arrested and had also been executed by the firing squad. It's not clear whether Celestia is dead or alive. The entire Hoff family of New Bay has also been obliterated. Their underground forces have been wiped out, Chandler's subordinate reported. When Chandler heard the news, his entire body trembled. He was in disbelief. Wendell, Cole, and the Hoff family of New Bay had all joined forces but were still unable to kill Caspian. And to top it off, they suffered such a pathetic defeat. Alfred was completely taken aback to hear the news. He had insulted Caspian when he was at Naporia back then. It was only then that he realized just how powerful Caspian was. Furthermore, after some investigating, everyone who had challenged Caspian faced a horrible fate, each one worse than the last. Alfred felt extremely uneasy. A bunch of useless idiots. How could they fail to kill Caspian even after putting in so much effort? Chandler was livid. He slammed his hand so hard on the wooden table before him that it broke into two. Mr. Kane Sr., anger will harm your health. What's our plan after this? Caspian will surely come after the Kane family, won't he? Alfred asked worriedly. Wendell and the rest had been tragically defeated. The extent of Caspian's power was unfathomable. It was too difficult for them to destroy Caspian. Moreover, Caspian might come after the Kane family. Chandler turned to look at Alfred with his bloodshot eyes full of unquenchable fury. Chapter 336. Chandler was infuriated. Alfred's entire body trembled when he saw how enraged Chandler was. He could feel a menacing energy emanating from Chandler. He knew very well how powerful Chandler was as well. We lost a lot of resources because of Caspian. For this, we must kill him, Chandler said viciously. Wendell's death was not that simple. This was because the Kane family had several casinos in New Bay, and they had all been shut down along with the other ones. The Kane family of Dord City was a lesser-known elite family. It was a huge loss for them to have their faction, Galacrest, in Naporia destroyed, and their casinos in New Bay shut down. The Kane family was one step further away from being one of the top elite families. But now, it was not even sure whether they could maintain their status as the lesser-known elite family in Dord City. How could Chandler not be enraged? He wished he could just tear Caspian into a million pieces now. But, Mr. Kane Sr., after all that has happened, we now have an inkling about the true extent of Caspian's powers. Even Charles couldn't do anything to him. I'm afraid it'll be tough for us to kill him, Alfred said in a concerned tone. Although the York family was also a relatively weaker elite family, they still had some influence. Nonetheless, the strength Caspian showcased this time was truly terrifying. The York family would disappear from Dord City for good. The most shocking part was that the Hoff family, the overlord of New Bay, was defeated by Caspian. Furthermore, Cole, who had become an innate grandmaster, was also crushed by Caspian. It would be a really difficult thing to destroy Caspian. If they insisted on declaring war against Caspian, the Kane family would definitely suffer a great loss. Even if they did get rid of Caspian, it remained unclear whether the Kanes could continue their legacy in Dord City. Just like that, Chandler swiftly became lost in his thoughts. As the head of the Kane family, he had to have a plan. What Alfred said made sense. Caspian's strength was unfathomable. It would be too dangerous if they acted rashly without having him figured out first. Once something went wrong, the Kane family would end up sharing the same fate as the York family. Chandler did not want his entire family to be in dire straits because of his decision. After he took a few deep breaths, he managed to calm himself down again. You're right. In order to get rid of Caspian, I have to have a strategy. I must kill him with one strike. I mustn't make any mistakes, Chandler said. In order to deal with Caspian, he should not act too hastily. Nevertheless, he had to avenge the Kane family and make Caspian pay for his deeds. They could only lie low for the time being. After they had regained their strength, they could strike when the opportunity came. Besides, now that the Kane family's influence had penetrated South Lake City, they could easily obtain updates on Caspian whenever they wanted to. You're right, Mr. Kane Sr. To deal with Caspian, we need a well-thought-out plan, Alfred said with a sigh of relief. Alfred was starting to feel uneasy. He even began to regret provoking Caspian. If it was not for Cole, the Kane family would not have been at odds with Caspian. It was a pity that Cole had died. Otherwise, Alfred would definitely make him pay. I order that Celestia is to be hunted down at once. Since she dared to defect, the only ending she deserves is death. Since they could not do anything about Caspian, they decided to get rid of Celestia first. That audacity of hers to flee after failing her mission was unacceptable to the Kane family. Yes, sir, I'll let the men know right away, Alfred said, nodding. He did not dare to delay. You may leave now, Chandler said dismissively. Alfred nodded and retreated. Who even are you? Caspian, Chandler muttered after Alfred had left. It was as if Caspian had come from the skies. Every detail about his whole life remained unexpected and mysterious. His strength was also outrageous. Moreover, the Kane family was on bad terms with Caspian, and it was irreconcilable. Chandler must think of a way to deal with Caspian. Otherwise, he would share the same fate as Wendell. At the airport of South Lake City, Caspian and Sylvia walked out of an exclusive sky bridge. Willow had already been waiting for him outside for some time. "Hubby, I'm here! When she saw Caspian walking out, she waved her hands and ran up to him until she finally leaped into his embrace. When Sylvia saw this, she turned away shyly. Caspian held Willow tightly in his embrace. He could not wait to be one with her. "Willow, I haven't seen you for a few days, and I've missed you." "I couldn't sleep well at night because I was alone," Caspian said with a smile. Willow blushed when he heard Caspian whispering sweet nothings to her. "There are people around us."
Whoa, what did you say?"
"I don't understand," Willow teased coquettishly with a pat on Caspian's chest. "What I said is all true, honey. Let's have a good sleep tonight, shall we?" Caspian said with a smile. "Okay," Willow softly whispered as she nodded. She deliberately blew him on the neck. Caspian was turned on. He was starting to feel the heat. "Let's go home," Caspian said as he carried her bridal style and exited the airport with long strides. Willow was even more shy now. Sylvia shook her head. Fortunately, she had turned away earlier. As long as she was still working with Caspian, she would never be short of public displays of affection. She suddenly felt lost and wondered when she could also find such an outstanding man. She gave it a thought and discovered that the men around her were not particularly outstanding. Moreover, having worked with Caspian for so long had made her standards even higher. In order to become her man, he had to at least be better than her. Otherwise, they were unqualified to be her man. After exiting the airport, Caspian and Sylvia entered a Rolls-Royce. Sylvia had made this arrangement in advance. Naturally, she would be the driver. Sylvia stepped on the accelerator and headed to the Riverside duplex villa. "Hubby!" In the back seat of the car, Caspian and Willow were engrossed in their lovey-dovey world. They completely ignored Sylvia's presence. Sylvia could only admire. Willow and Caspian were like a couple passionately in love with each other. They wished they could be with each other every second of the day. "By the way, how's father doing?" Caspian asked. "Oh, my. After Dad had taken the money, he showed it off when he returned to Stewart residence. My mom was also ecstatic," Willow said, shaking her head. She told Caspian about everything that had happened in the past few days. When Carl had returned to South Lake City, he told Kate that he had made $800 million. Kate was so proud that she showed off her wealth to the others. When Caspian heard this, he frowned slightly. Indeed, Kate was still odd. However, Caspian could not be bothered about them. The Stewart family could live the way they want. It was fine as long as he and Willow could live their own lives. "So, is there anything going on with South Lake Corporation recently?" Caspian asked. A heavy expression appeared on Willow's face as she said, "South Lake Corporation. Chapter 337, beaten up on the streets." "What about South Lake Corporation?" Caspian asked nervously. "Did something happen to South Lake Corporation during the period of his absence?" "Got you. You should see the look on your face right now." "Nothing's happened. I was just pulling your leg." "The company's doing very well. In fact, no other corporation is bigger than us in the entire South Lake City. Previously, we had the media promote the promotional film that we had filmed in Sealand. Because of that, our business has grown exponentially. If this trend continues, South Lake Corporation will become the largest corporation in South Diatoran." Once the topic had changed, Willow lit up and began talking excitedly. Caspian smiled as he watched Willow. Willow had become someone truly alluring, who was confident and beautiful. When Willow saw that Caspian was in a daze, she stopped talking immediately and asked with concern, "Hubby, I'd talked too much, haven't I?" "Of course not. I think you're wonderful, honey. You're doing such a good job running the company," Caspian said with a smile. "I'm lucky to have Miranda assist me along the way, and you've also helped me out a lot during this period," Willow said humbly. She knew in her heart that Caspian had contributed a lot in helping South Lake Corporation. During this period, Caspian had been dealing with many companies, and they had all become branches of South Lake City. Now, South Lake Corporation had become a company with massive influence in the entire South Diatoran. Hubby, you're the best. I love you, Willow shyly said as she leaned against Caspian's chest. At that moment, she felt like the happiest woman in the world. She suddenly felt that it was a blessing from the heavens that she was married to Caspian. Of course I'll treat you well. Silly, who told you to marry me? Caspian stroked Willow's hair. When Willow helped him wholeheartedly back then, he already knew that Willow was the one for him. He needed to be good to her. Both of them were fully immersed in their affectionate love for each other. The air around them was filled with love and romance. Caspian lowered his head and gave her a peck on the forehead. Willow became bashful and buried her head in his arms. Suddenly, there was a loud screeching sound of the brakes. Both Caspian and Willow were jerked forward in their seats. Caspian scowled. What happened? Did something happen? Willow asked fearfully. My apologies, Willow. Sylvia said apologetically. Caspian turned to see what was in front of the car. There was a group of people gathered on the road. Let's go check it out, Caspian said as he had Willow follow him out of the car. As soon as they got out of the car, they could see several brawny men beating an old woman up. One of the men had a scar on his face. He was scolding the old woman, saying, "Stupid old woman, you don't plan on paying your debt, huh? Do you want to die?" As soon as he finished his sentence, he lifted a leg and kicked the old woman on the back. "It hurts. I beg you, please stop hitting me. I'm really broke. If I had the money, I would have paid you already," the old woman pleaded bitterly. "You're penniless. Don't you have a house? You can mortgage it, can't you?" the man with the scar said. The old woman quickly fell to her knees and begged the man desperately. "I can't do that. That's the only place I have to put a roof over my family's head. Otherwise, my children would have to sleep on the streets," the old woman pleaded with tears in her eyes. "I beg of you, please give me a few more days. My daughter's weak. We don't even have the money to pay for her medical fee. I really don't have the money to pay you now." "Fuck, stop blabbering away. I don't give a shit whether your daughter lives or dies," the scarred man said. In a fit of rage, he kicked the woman to the ground. The other men followed suit and started beating her up again. "Stop hitting me, please! Stop hitting me! I'm going to die at this rate." The old woman writhed on the ground as she wailed bitterly at the top of her lungs. More people joined the crowd on the sidelines. They were discussing among themselves. However, not one person went to help her. Everybody knew better than to mess with the scarred man. Nobody wanted to get into trouble over helping a stranger out. "Beat the shit out of her. I don't believe that she doesn't have any money on her. Keep hitting her until she pays us back," the scarred man said, delighted. Willow was infuriated to the point of trembling as she watched everything happen. How could something like this happen out on the streets? It was a bunch of burly men against one frail old woman. How was it lawful? And the people that surrounded them, weren't they a little too indifferent? Scowling, Caspian was becoming enraged. He thought that after flying dragons had been eradicated, there would no longer be such domineering thugs roaming the streets of South Lake City. He never expected to encounter a situation like this just after returning to the city. Did this mean that everything he had done so far was all for nothing? "Stop! You're going to kill her!" Willow yelled as she rushed out. When the men heard Willow's yelling, they were stunned for a moment and stopped what they were doing. The old woman lying on the ground was covered in cuts and bruises. She was also breathing heavily. The scarred man's face hardened when he saw Willow interrupting them. He snapped. "Where did this bitch come from? Do you also have a death wish?" He glared at Willow without looking away, hoping to scare her away. He began to realize that she was quite pretty, and began to lust after her. "Aren't you ashamed of yourselves for beating a woman up in broad daylight? Believe it or not, I'll call the police and have you arrested," Willow said. The scarred man ogled at Willow. His gaze became even more lecherous. He had slept with many women before, but none of them came close to Willow in terms of elegance and beauty. He even began picturing a lewd scene in his head. Then, he laughed. "You'll report us to the police? Try it. Then. You think I'm afraid? It's only natural for a debtor to pay their debts back. She refused to pay me, so I'm beating her up." "What about it?" the scarred man said with a look of disdain on his face. "But you can't just beat her to death. I'll pay on behalf of her. Tell me, how much did she owe you?" Willow said coldly. She no longer batted an eye when it came to small sums like these. "Forget about the money. As long as you sleep with me tonight, the debt is cleared. I've never seen such a pretty lady like you before." If you serve me well tonight, I will never look for her anymore." The scarred man gave Willow a lewd smirk. As soon as he finished his sentence, he stretched his hand out and tried to grab Willow. "Scumbag," Willow said before slapping the man on the face. Now that she had become the CEO of Southlake Corporation, she carried herself in a way that fitted her status. Her demeanor in front of Caspian was always a meek one, but when it came to other people, she would be more assertive as she was the CEO of Southlake Corporation with a net worth of tens of billions. Chapter 338. So what if it's the Massey family? The scarred man was completely stunned. Who was this woman? How dared she lay a finger on him? She must have a death wish. Suddenly, the scarred man was consumed with rage. "Fuck! I'll fucking take you now! Beg for mercy before my crotch!" The scarred man angrily cursed as he lifted his hand, wanting to teach Willow a lesson. However, he felt that something was off when he saw how calm she was. "Who said you can touch my wife?" Caspian said as he swung his arm and grabbed the scarred man's wrist. "Who the fuck are you?" the man said angrily. "I'm your father," Caspian mocked in an indifferent tone. The scarred man's expression turned serious. He must have forgotten to check his horoscope today. Everyone was trying to challenge him. "You want to die? Huh?" the scarred man yelled angrily. He wanted to teach Caspian a lesson. But no matter how much he struggled, he could not break free from Caspian's clutch. Caspian's grip was like a clamp. The man could not move his wrist at all. He began cursing loudly. "Let go of me now!" Suddenly, there was a sound of bone cracking. Caspian had tightened his grip and broke the man's wrist. "My hand, it fucking hurts," the scarred man yowled. He almost blacked out from the excruciating pain. "Are you okay, Willow?" Caspian asked, full of concern. He completely ignored the scarred. "I'm okay," Willow softly said as she shook her head. "Fuck! Kill this bastard!" the scarred man yelled menacingly. He was not a pushover. Just as he finished his sentence, several burly men rushed toward Caspian with their fists in the air and threw their punches at Caspian. Several thuds were heard. Caspian threw his punches at the speed of light. Nobody at the scene managed to catch it. The men had already fallen to the ground and passed out. "How's this possible?" the scarred man said, his face filled with shock. He was so surprised that Caspian was this powerful. Caspian glared at the scarred man and slowly approached him. This sleazebag had the audacity to lust after his wife. His sins were unforgivable. When the scarred man saw Caspian's piercing eyes, he trembled. He had never seen such piercing eyes before. Just simply looking into his eyes made him feel suffocated. "Don't come near me! What do you want?" the man yelled with a horrified expression. "How dare you lust after my wife? Do you want to die so badly?" Caspian said coldly. "Do you even know who I am, punk? I work for the Massey family. If you dare to lay a finger on me, you won't be able to stay in Southlake City anymore." The scarred man said viciously. "The Massey family?" Caspian frowned upon hearing the name. "Now you're scared. Huh? Kneel before me and apologize instantly." "I'll just pretend this didn't happen," the scarred man said proudly. "He's from the Massey family. This means trouble. This man's in trouble." The onlookers looked worried when they heard the scarred man mention that he worked for the Massey family. It was as if the Massey family was a prominent family. However, Caspian was confused. "Which Massey family?" Caspian asked, seemingly confused. "You've never even heard of the Massey family? You're such a country bumpkin. The Massey family and the Stewart family are in laws. Miss. Stewart of the Stewart family is the CEO of Southlake Corporation. You must have at least heard about Southlake Corporation, right?" the scarred man said with a smile. Everybody in Southlake City had heard of Southlake Corporation and the Stewart family. Willow and the Stewart family might not be on good terms with each other, but in the eyes of outsiders, she was still the daughter of the Stewart family. With the rise of Southlake Corporation, a lot of elite families began to try to curry favor with the Stewart family. However, their true intention was to flatter Willow. Although the Stewart family did not own many estates, they had swiftly gained prominence within Southlake City. Therefore, nobody dared to offend the Stewart family or the Southlake Corporation. Because of this, the status of the Massey family had increased exponentially as they were the in-laws of the Stewart family. Caspian was getting infuriated. It turned out that the Massey family was the one disrupting the harmony of the city. Standing at the side was Willow. Her expression hardened. She never expected that her own mother's family would be the ones to create trouble in the city. Caspian already hated Kate. Now that they were doing this, They would only incur his wrath. Hubby, Willow said as she held onto Caspian's arm, slightly worried. It seemed like many things had been going down in South Lake City during this period of time. Even Willow was surprised that there were a lot of people out there who were looking to curry favor with her. It's fine. I know how to deal with this, Caspian assured as he patted her hand. Willow's relationship with the Stewart family was hanging by a thread. As for the Massey family, Caspian couldn't care less. You may deal with this however you want to, hubby. I'll support you, Willow said with a serious look on her face. She knew very well that Caspian could not tolerate wrongdoings. He would not allow for such atrocity to happen. Even though it was hard for her to decide, she chose to stand on Caspian's side completely. You're too nice, honey, Caspian said, feeling rather emotional. After all, this matter was related to her grandmother. Caspian was so moved that she chose to be sensible about it. The scarred man let out a laugh. Are you afraid now? Hurry and kneel before me. Beg me for mercy and I'll let you go, he said arrogantly. As the Massey family's status had risen significantly lately, most people would show their respect to them. Trash, Caspian roared. Then, he extended his leg and kicked the scarred man in the chest. The scarred man flew out. He landed with his face planted on the ground. Even a few of his teeth got knocked out. Fuck! The scarred man stumbled for a while and got to his feet. He looked at Caspian, feeling rather surprised. He had clearly mentioned that he worked for the Massey family, and yet Caspian still dared to lay a finger on him? Just you wait, punk. Offending the Massey family means offending the Stewart family, and that also means you have offended the Southlake Corporation, the scarred man roared. Sylvia, call Lincoln, and ask him what the hell he's been doing all this while. Ask him if this was how he's been managing South Lake City, Caspian said to Sylvia, completely ignoring the scarred man. Back then, Lincoln, the richest man in the Two Lakes area, was dependent on Caspian. He even vowed to manage South Lake City well. It had not been long since he left South Lake City, yet the city had already been turned upside down. Lincoln had to be held accountable for this. Yes, sir? Sylvia nodded and made the phone call immediately. What? Lincoln? The scarred man was momentarily stunned. Wasn't Lincoln the richest man in the Two Lakes area? Even though his prominence had dropped, he still held a certain status. How could Caspian just casually call and have this kind of prominent man show up? Chapter 339. Lincoln was scared witless. The scarred man was momentarily stunned. Even though Lincoln was not really active in South Lake City, he was still the richest man in the Two Lakes area. Many forces had been assigned under Lincoln's control. So, how could such a prominent figure just casually show up? Stop bluffing, punk. It doesn't matter who comes. As long as you've offended the Massey family, you're dead, the scarred man coldly said as he looked at Caspian. When Caspian heard this, he suddenly turned back. His eyes were filled with cold malice. His eyes seemed like they could kill. The look in his eyes was extremely terrifying. When the scarred man saw Caspian's menacing glare, he couldn't help but tremble. His legs were starting to weaken as well. At that moment, he even had the urge to kneel before Caspian. What was this? It was then that the roaring sound of a car was heard. A ton top of the line Maybach pulled up in front of them. As soon as the car came to a halt, a man stepped out of the car in a rushed manner. This man was the richest man in the Two Lakes area, Lincoln thought. Those who were standing on the sidelines were dumbfounded. They were surprised. Wasn't Lincoln a man of great importance? How could he rush over after one call? While everyone was still in a daze, they saw Lincoln rush to Caspian. With a thud, Lincoln knelt before Caspian. Mr. Lynch, I didn't know you had returned to South Lake City. Otherwise, I would have gone to the airport and welcomed you back. Please, punish me as you see fit, Lincoln said with respect. His demeanor did not resemble the wealthiest man in the region. He was reduced to an inferior man in front of Caspian. Everyone who was watching was even more shocked. An influential man like Lincoln was actually kneeling before this young man. Who was this person? Caspian stared at Lincoln silently. Lincoln felt even more nervous. Cold sweat kept breaking out on his forehead. It was clear to him that something must have happened in South Lake City. Otherwise, Caspian would not have asked his subordinate to contact him. He might have been the wealthiest man in the Two Lakes area, but Caspian was the Diatoranian god of war. His status as the wealthiest man meant nothing when compared to Caspian. While Lincoln was still trembling with fear, Caspian pointed at the scarred man. He said, "Lincoln, you said that you'd work for me and deal with the underground forces of South Lake City. But what we have here are a bunch of thugs beating a woman up. You have some explanations to do." Lincoln's heart sank. He suddenly had a bad feeling. In the end, something had happened. Back then, he had to rely on Caspian. He had even invested in a large amount of assets for South Lake Corporation in exchange for the stability they had today. However, unlawful activities started to occur again in South Lake City. No wonder Caspian was infuriated. If this matter was handled poorly, he would have to leave South Lake City. "Bernard, you bastard! How have you been managing this area?" Lincoln turned his head to yell at Bernard. Then, he slapped Bernard hard on the face. It was not possible for Lincoln to look over everything within the city, as there were too many things to manage every day. He had delegated this area to Bernard. It was clear that Bernard did not do his work well. With a thump, Bernard fell to his knees. Previously, he was severely punished after stirring up some trouble with Caspian. So, he no longer dared to provoke Caspian. "Bernard, do you know this person?" Caspian asked while looking at Bernard. "Mr. Lynch, Bernard choked on his words. He was too frightened to even complete his sentence. He began recalling the previous time he had offended Caspian and got scared as a result. For a moment, he did not know how to answer. "Useless bastard, Mr. Lynch is asking you a question. Answer him." Lincoln became impatient upon seeing Bernard acting this way. He gave Bernard a few more slaps across the face. I know him. This person is Diego Kramer. Everyone else calls him Mr. Kramer," Bernard said as he held his palm to his sore cheek. "Did you know that he has been acting up in this area?" Caspian asked. "First," Bernard stammered, not knowing how to respond again. "Bernard, you bastard, how dare you not give an explanation to Mr. Lynch? If you don't answer him honestly, I will end you," Lincoln shouted. Bernard became immensely frightened when he saw that Lincoln was furious. He said fearfully, "I knew about this, Mr. Lynch, but there was nothing I could do about it. Diego works for the Massey family. The Massey family and the Stewart family," Bernard said as he stole a quick glance at Willow. Then, he remained silent, not daring to utter a word more. "Just say it. You can pretend I'm not here," Willow said, frowning slightly. Before, she was someone who was easily empathetic, causing her to be trampled over by others. If this matter was indeed related to the Massey family, she would still stand firmly on Caspian's side. Diego's a thug that the Massey family trained. The Massey family and the Stewart family are in-laws. Now, the entire South Lake City knows that Miss Stewart of the Stewart family is the CEO of South Lake Corporation. Nobody dares to mess with the Stewart family. "I really have no choice," Bernard said urgently. Bernard was also rendered helpless. The Massey family had a close relationship with the Stewart family. How would he dare to meddle with such matters? Even if he had 10 lives, it would not suffice to make up for it if he were ever to offend South Lake Corporation. After hearing his explanation, Caspian frowned. Bernard was not entirely to blame for this matter. Even though Willow had cut ties with the Stewart family, nobody outside their family knew about this. To them, the daughter of the Stewart family was the CEO of South Lake Corporation, and for this reason, they had to be more respectful toward the Stewart family. "I didn't know Bernard would be such a coward, Mr. Lynch. It's all my fault for not teaching him." "I'm willing to be punished," Lincoln said. He was feeling uneasy because Caspian was staying quiet. He thought that Caspian was getting angry over this matter. "Please spare me, Mr. Lynch. I really could not do anything about it," Bernard pleaded bitterly. He felt aggrieved. He even wanted to just kill Diego then and there. This bastard used his connection with the Massey family as a ticket to act recklessly in this area. He must have really thought that he was invincible. If Caspian had been offended, everyone would suffer. Bernard felt unjustly wronged. He felt like he had been accused of a crime he did not commit, but he could not do anything about it. "Forget it. I can't fully blame all of you. I just wanted to look into the situation. You may get up now," Caspian said as he gestured for both of them to get up from the ground. The two men exchanged looks. Bernard let out a heavy sigh of relief and immediately got up. "Nevertheless, you have to remember, if anything like this were to happen again in South Lake City, I will not show any leniency," Caspian said coldly. There was a reason Caspian had Lincoln and Bernard work for him. If he had to leave South Lake City one day, the peace and order of the city could at least be maintained. If the two could not even execute their task well, he might as well have Joey from the Inspector General's office manage the city. Yes, sir, we understand, Mr. Lynch, Lincoln and Bernard said in unison. They did not dare to put the blame on anyone else. You may handle the rest of this matter. Remember to get to the bottom of it and investigate the causes, Caspian said as he pointed at the stunned Diego. Chapter 340, A Chance Encounter. Yes, sir, rest assured, Mr. Lynch, I will get to the bottom of this matter, Lincoln said as he nodded. Afterward, he looked at Bernard and yelled, What are you doing still standing there? Take these men away. Bernard was a simple-minded man. He was not capable of thinking further ahead. Lincoln was already planning to teach him a lesson when they returned home so that he would be more careful in the future. Yes, sir, Bernard nodded. Then, he walked toward Diego with hurried steps. At that moment, he was filled with rage. It was all because of this bastard that he was punished so severely. He was worried that Lincoln would not entrust any duties to him ever again. He might even kick him out. It would really be unfortunate if that were to happen. Diego, you have always misused your relationship with the Massey family to terrorize the people. Your end has finally come. Tell me, do you want to get out of here on your own, or would you like me to drag you out after I've beaten the shit out of you? Bernard said viciously. Diego was at a loss. Who actually was Caspian that Lincoln was so obedient to him? It appeared that Lincoln and Bernard were both afraid of Caspian. But Lincoln was once the richest man in the Two Lakes area. Would he be scared of anyone? The more he thought about it, the more he could not wrap his head around it. He was not a complete fool as well. Mr. Underhill, can you tell me which gang this man is from? Diego asked as he looked at Bernard. Diego, all you have to know is that you've offended a really prominent person. You are doomed this time. Bernard was not able to divulge Caspian's real identity as well. With just these few words, Diego's expression changed. Caspian was a prominent person? Diego suddenly recalled that the matrilocal son-in-law of the Stewart family was also called Caspian. Were they the same person? He had heard many things about Caspian before. Just the fact that John Anderson, a senior general officer from South Aridlands, had attended Caspian's wedding was enough to shock many people. The Massey family might be related to the Stewart family, but this piece of news was nothing compared to the one between Caspian and John. Diego was feeling really conflicted. He was not sure what to do anymore. His face was ashen, and he felt unsettled. He remained stunned and did not move an inch. He never doubted Bernard's words. Caspian must have been a really prominent person to have made Lincoln obey him. Bernard snickered as he looked at Diego. This bastard could have chosen to offend anyone, but he chose to offend Caspian. Let's go. You'd better tell me everything from the beginning when we get back. I suggest all of you follow me back without trying anything. I'll make sure you regret your actions if you do, Bernard said. Bernard also had to suffer for the trouble that Diego had created, and that called for a punishment. Diego and others were taken away by Bernard's men. I give you half an hour to find out about everything, Caspian said to Lincoln. Yes, sir, Lincoln nodded. He did not dare to delay the new task. He left promptly with Bernard and the rest. The luxury cars left the scene one after another. Those watching on the sidelines were dumbfounded. Everyone looked at Caspian, feeling astonished. Suddenly, someone exclaimed, He seems to be the matrilocal son-in-law of the Stewart family. Didn't everyone claim that he was a loser? Look, could that woman standing next to him be Willow Stewart, the CEO of Southlake Corporation? These two sentences captured many people's attention. Caspian and Willow's lavish wedding ceremony left an impression on a lot of people back then. Everyone who knew about the wedding was extremely shocked. That's right, he's Caspian. And the woman beside him is Willow. Who would have thought that a matrilocal son-in-law would become so powerful? He's just lucky that he got to marry a wife who's the CEO of a corporation. In the end, he's still a loser who freeloads off his wife. The people were discussing among themselves. Willow was a highly coveted woman in Southlake City. There were many men who wanted to marry her, but she ended up choosing a person like Caspian. Nonetheless, that wedding of the century was beyond the reach of many people. Caspian did not care about any of their opinions. Instead, he looked to Sylvia and said, Go and investigate. Find out what the Massey family has been up to recently in Southlake City. Yes, sir, Sylvia nodded. It seemed like the Massey family was going to be doomed this time. Hubby, Willow walked toward Caspian and hugged him. She never thought that someone this evil existed in her grandmother's family. This matter would send Caspian into a difficult dilemma. I didn't know that the Masseys would be like this, Willow said coquettishly. She was feeling extremely apologetic. The public did not know that she had cut ties with the Stewart family. If it were not for her status as CEO, they would not even bother flattering the Stewart family and the Massey family. I don't blame you. Silly. Don't worry. I will handle this properly. Caspian patted Willow gently and comforted her. Willow was extremely moved. With Caspian by her side, she did not have to worry about these matters at all. At that moment, a wailing sounded from the ground. Are you all right, ma'am? Willow went to the old woman and asked as she knelt on the ground. I'm fine, the old woman said as she shook her head. Then, she gritted her teeth and pushed herself to get up. However, her entire body was in pain, and she did not even have the strength to stand. Please don't move, ma'am. I'll get an ambulance and have you sent to the hospital, Willow said as she promptly took her phone out to make the call. No, there's no need, the old woman said quickly. But, ma'am, you're in a critical condition. You have to go to the hospital, Willow said, not understanding why she was refusing this gesture. The burly men had struck her hard. She must have gotten badly injured as she was already very old. If she was not treated in time, it would be troublesome if there were any underlying illnesses. I'm grateful for your kindness, but I can't go to the hospital. It will cost a lot of money, and I don't even have any money at all. You may leave me be, the old woman said helplessly. The poor could not afford to be sick because they would not have any money to pay for treatment. Hospital bills had become too expensive. Even a simple checkup would come up to hundreds of dollars. Medication would be an additional hundreds of dollars added to the bill. The old woman no longer had any spare money for the treatment. She could only endure the pain. You don't have to worry about this, ma'am. I will foot the bill for the medical expenses, Willow said empathetically while looking at the old woman. That wouldn't be right. We're complete strangers. I'm too embarrassed to have you pay for me, the old woman said as she shook her head. She was already beyond grateful that Caspian and Willow had come forward to help her confront the thugs. There would always be many people watching, but to have people come forward and help was rare. It's okay, ma'am. Don't worry about it, and just go to the hospital, Willow said, smiling. Diego worked for the Massey family, which was her grandfather's family, so she should bear the responsibility for what just happened. But the old woman was still conflicted. You don't have to hesitate anymore, ma'am. Your health is important. Let's just get you to the hospital first, Caspian persuaded.